You were never just skin and thoughts. You were carved from echoes, a vibration wrapped in silence, shaped by something older than the stars. But you've forgotten, not by accident, but by design. There's a quiet ache beneath your ribs you've learned to ignore, a weight behind your eyes that visits when the world grows too still. You tell yourself it's just stress, just tiredness, just the mind playing tricks. But it isn't. It's memory. Memory your body carries like a secret it's not allowed to speak. You see, long before we learned to speak with words, we spoke with pressure, with breath, with the trembling of fingertips on sacred skin. Your body is not a machine, it's a temple. And somewhere within it, there is a forgotten doorway, not made of bone or blood, but of something more ancient. A place that responds not to reason, but to feeling. When you are sad, truly sad, there is a part of you that calls out, not to another human, not even to yourself, but to the divine. And the divine answers, not through the sky, but through a point hidden just beneath your skin. You were never alone. You were never disconnected. You just forgot where to press. This video is not advice. It is a thread, pulled from the fabric of your soul, meant to lead you back to what you already know. Mystical call to subscribe. Soft CTA. If something within you just moved, if your chest feels a little heavier or lighter, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the Spine Gospel, not because you're curious, but because something ancient in you remembers. Somewhere inside you, there's a place that flinches when the world gets too loud. It doesn't speak in words, it pulses. Not the heart, not the mind, but a place in between, a space where grief becomes gravity, and silence becomes sound. Ancient ones knew this place. Before there were hospitals, before machines and maps, they sat in circles of stillness. They closed their eyes and listened to the body the way others listened to stars. They didn't believe the body was flesh. They believed it was a mirror, a sacred instrument made to echo the voice of the cosmos. The Taoists called it Shen Men, the spirit gate, a point on the ear where the soul is said to enter and leave the body. Sufis placed their hands on their chests, not to soothe but to awaken, knowing the heart was not just a pump, but a throne. The Egyptians etched symbols into temple walls, replicating the spine, the lungs, the points of light that radiated from sacred touch. They mapped the body as if it were the universe itself, and perhaps it was. Because there is a point, a single place hidden just beneath the skin that does not belong to pain, but to presence. When you press it during sadness, something changes. Not always loud, sometimes just a warmth, sometimes a tear, sometimes the sense that you're not alone. This point was never meant to be explained, it was meant to be felt. It is not a button to fix your sadness, it is a doorway to let your sadness speak. And the divine listens through doorways we no longer touch. So when your fingers tremble with emotion, when your body feels like it remembers something older than your name, you are not breaking down. You are tuning in. There is a current under your skin, and you've only just started to feel it move again. At some point, the sacred became superstition. The body, once seen as a temple of stars, was reduced to wires and weight. The pulse was no longer a rhythm of the cosmos, but a number on a screen. We stopped listening to the language beneath our skin, because the world taught us to forget, taught us to measure everything, to distrust silence, to fear emotion. And so the most ancient voice, the one that trembled quietly inside the chest when sorrow came, was labeled irrational, a glitch, a weakness, a chemical imbalance. You were not taught to trust your trembling. You were taught to numb it. They replaced your inner knowing with diagnosis, your sacred longing with distractions. And your body, once a scroll of divine memory, was renamed biology. This is the illusion, not a lie, but a veil, so thin it clings to the soul like mist, so constant it feels like truth. You were told to chase happiness like a product and bury sadness like a crime, but sadness is not a flaw. It is a signal, a bell rung by the soul when it's been too long away from the light. And that sacred point within you, the one that answers when you press it, it still remembers, even when you forget. The mystics warned us, the world is a veil. What you touch is not the whole. What you see is not all that is. And yet, we worship the visible. We kneel before screens, systems, and routines. We call it progress. But underneath the noise, beneath the illusion, something is stirring. A pulse, not measured in BPM, but in belonging. The mirror we hold to our face isn't made of glass. It's made of belief, and belief can bend. Because even in forgetting, there is something in you that resists, something that flinches when you hear a certain sound, something that softens when you place your hand over your heart, something that never stopped listening. What if the things your ancestors whispered in candlelight, the rituals they performed in silence, the points they pressed while weeping under the stars, were not myths, but maps? And what if, centuries later, science, dressed in lab coats and data, is only just beginning to understand what the mystics always knew? You are not a machine, you are resonance. There is a river inside you, the ancients called chi, or prana, or ruh. Modern science calls it electrical signaling or subtle biofields, but names don't matter. The pulse does. When you are sad, the vagus nerve, a golden thread running from your brainstem T, or your belly, begins to hum. It is the nerve of emotion, of trembling, of stillness. And when you touch that sacred point, the one hidden like a pearl beneath your skin, you're not just pressing flesh, you're pressing memory, waking up a system that once spoke fluently in frequencies. Your sadness, the tightness in your chest, the shaking in your fingers, is not dysfunction, it's a signal seeking coherence. Your heart carries an electrical field measurable up to 8 feet away. Your skin senses emotion before your brain even forms a thought, and your body, beneath it all, is listening. The point you've forgotten, that sacred center between breath and belief, responds not to logic, but to touch, breath, intention. It is not a switch, it is a tuning fork. And when the vibration is right, when your breath slows, your touch softens, your grief is allowed to speak, this point hums, it resonates, and the divine answers. This isn't magic, it's memory, encoded in fascia, stored in silence. Science now speaks of somatic memory, how the body keeps stories the mind cannot hold. But long before trauma had a name, the elders placed hands on trembling hearts and waited for the shaking to pass. You were never meant to survive by thinking alone. You were built to feel, to pulse, to remember. And that sacred point, the one that stirs when your sadness rises, isn't broken. It's a signal receiver trying to tune you back into the frequency of who you truly are. And the moment it hums, the illusion begins to fall away. The veil softens, and something within you begins to glow. What if temples were not built for gods, but for your body? What if every column, every chamber, every golden ratio carved in stone was a reflection of what already lives beneath your skin? The ancients did not guess, they remembered. The Egyptians shaped their temples with sacred precision, not to impress but to align. Each wall echoed the curve of the spine. Each passage mirrored the body's inner journey from fear to light. They placed the Jed pillar, symbol of stability, at the center of their rituals, a mirror of the spinal column where energy rises like breath from earth to stars. Initiates were led into darkened chambers where priests pressed sacred points along the body, not to heal, but to awaken. Because to them, awakening was not mental, it was cellular. The body had to remember what the soul never forgot. In China, the Taoists mapped the body as a flowing river of light. They named the points, places where qi gathers, where the spirit hums louder, and treated them not as anatomy, but as portals. The ear's Shen Men, the spirit gate, was touched during times of grief and transformation, not to stop the tears, but to let them speak in the language of the divine. Legends of Atlantis whisper of crystal harmonics, structures that sang in resonance with the human body, where energy flowed through corridors tuned to emotion, and sadness was never exiled, only guided back to harmony. Even sacred geometry, the spiral, the golden mean, the mandala, was not abstract design. It was the imprint of the soul, an echo of the body's hidden order. To press the sacred point was not an act of self-soothing. It was an initiation, a ritual, a way of saying to the universe, I am ready to feel again. And the universe always answered, through vibration, through breath, through the trembling in your chest, when ancient truths rise uninvited. The temples still stand, not because of their stone, but because they carry the geometry of memory. And now, you carry that same blueprint within you. You don't need to cross oceans to find it. You need only place your hand on the body and listen, because your skin remembers what your words forgot. You are not a visitor to the sacred, you are its living. GD Design. Imagine your body as a cathedral, not built with stone, but with silence and light. Each breath you take is a candle lit. Each heartbeat, a drum echoing in the sacred hall of your being. You've searched the sky for signs. You've whispered prayers into the night, hoping something beyond would hear. But the answer has always been within, not buried, not lost, just waiting, beneath the noise, beneath the ache. There is a point within you. You felt it stir when the world falls quiet. When sadness lingers and the distractions die, it calls. Not loudly, not with sound, but with presence. You do not need to fix anything. You do not need to understand. You need only breathe. Slowly, as if each inhale is a return, as if each exhale is a letting go of everything that never belonged. Now place your fingers where your body leads you. On the chest, behind the ear, at the base of the neck. Not to press, but to listen. This point does not respond to effort. It responds to honesty. Let your sadness rise like incense. Let it swirl without judgment. Let it tremble, because trembling is how the soul reclaims the body. There is a stillness beneath your sorrow. It does not condemn you. It does not rush you. It waits, like the hush before a sacred song, like the sky before rain. And when you touch it, not as a fix, but as a reverent remembering, something opens. Not outside you, not above, inside. The source is not a place you travel to. It is the hum that lives just beneath your skin, just beneath the grief, just beneath the name you've been taught to answer to. Breathe again, and feel what remains when all the noise is gone. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not late. You are returning. You were never lost, only distant, like a note drifting just outside the harmony, waiting to be sung again. The sadness wasn't but your enemy. It was the doorway, and the point you pressed was the key you forgot you were holding. The sacred doesn't arrive with thunder. It comes in the quiet, when the breath slows, when the touch softens, when you finally stop searching. And maybe, just maybe, you've felt it now. Not a miracle, not a voice from the clouds, but a shift. A warmth behind the ribs, a quiet pulsing under the skin, a sense that something ancient is no longer sleeping. Because you didn't just watch this, you crossed through it. You remembered. Not with your mind, but with your being. The divine was never far. It just needed you to turn inward, to press the point, to feel, to listen. And now, the silence inside you is no longer empty. It is full, alive, holy. So let this moment linger. Let the doorway stay open, not forever, just long enough for the next breath to carry it deeper. You are not who you were when this began. You are older now, softer, wiser, because something sacred has stirred, and it will not go back to sleep. If this opened something ancient inside you, if the pulse beneath your sadness began to sing, don't forget this doorway. Let the remembering continue. Subscribe to the Spine Gospel, not because you must, but because you felt the truth. The mind forgets, but the soul remembers.